Best of luck in your new job.
Thank you very much.
Tom, congratulations on the appointment. You're a week in the job. How are you finding it?
So far, so good. It's something that I've been looking forward to doing since I got the news a couple of weeks ago, and so far, so good.
When the position became available, did you have to think long and hard about applying for it? Was it something that you had thought of previously, or was there a part of you with a young family said, maybe not this time?
It was something that immediately appealed. And look, I knew that the Pádraig's tenure was going to draw to a close at some stage. When exactly, I didn't know, of course. I wouldn't have been privy to that. But I'm an ambitious person, like to achieve the most that I can achieve with the abilities that I have. And I certainly have always enjoyed my time working in here, Damien. So there's a sense too that you'd like to be able to contribute as much as you can. And when I saw the position becoming available, sure, it was only natural that my mind would turn to it. It didn't take a whole lot of soul searching, to be honest. The hours and the family angle of it, so on, that kind of applies already in the previous job, and it applies to pretty much all of my colleagues in here at the moment anyway. So that wasn't a huge consideration. Not too many positions like that come up, Damien, in an organisation that you feel so strongly about. So it's an opportunity to make a little bit of a contribution and to maybe continue on some of the things that I learned from the two previous incumbents. So it didn't take an awful lot of soul searching, to be honest.
If you say the name Tom Ryan in GAA, the words financial controller are at the top of everybody's lists. People might not know a whole lot more, people maybe on the periphery of the association. Where do you come from, your family life? Where does the GAA fit into that?
I'm from Carlow originally, Damien, from Carlow town. So I went to school in, it's not the CBS anymore, it was at CBS as was. But oddly enough, I left, I'm far longer in Dublin than I ever was in Carlow, but I haven't lost the accent, and I haven't, GAA people don't lose the identity of where you're from. I'm living in Dublin since my teens, really, to tell you the truth. I'm an accountant by trade, and I worked in various enterprises of various scales and sectors and so on. And I joined the GAA as finance director in 2007. I live in Terenure in Dublin. My wife Mairead is from Limerick, and she's just as interested in matters GAA as I am. I have 3 kids from 16 down to 7. The older 2 lads are playing away. The little one hasn't quite got the bug yet. No doubt she will. I'm a member of Fogs, a hurling club out in Templeogue in Dublin for a long time. That's where the 2 boys are playing. One lad playing minor this year and one lad playing under 15. Done a few jobs of various shapes and sizes in Fogs over the last 10 or more years. I suppose traditionally it would have been a kind of a home for people from the country. But actually the team that we fielded in the championship last year, somebody said to me out of the 15 that started, 13 of those fellas came up through our own juvenile setup, which was a kind of a landmark thing for us. Always it would have been seen as a home for lads coming up from the country looking for somewhere to play. The juvenile section there is probably only really achieving any real strength and volume in the last 10, 12, 15 years. But the number of children going down there playing both hurling and camogie is fantastic. They're lovely people. I've been the treasurer there for, I think, 6 or 7 years or so, and various other few bits and pieces and helping out with teams and things like that.
That might have to stall for a couple of years.
I hope it won't. A few people have said that to me. John the chairman was on to me about it, and a few people, I hope it won't, because it'd be really disappointing from my point of view if you find yourself in a position that means you have to give up the things that you really, really like. So going to matches and helping out down below, they're my friends, that's what I like to do.
And Tom, when you arrived up in Dublin then, you arrived up with your qualifications, you came from Carlow, you ended up ultimately working with Brown Thomas before you came to the GAA, but what would have, outside of the association, what would have interested you, your hobbies, and would you have had much time, because to get to where you got to in your career, presumably you had to put in late hours, a lot of hard work as well, but would you have had time for much of a other activity outside of it?
You know yourself, like when family matters take precedence, so yeah, you disappear into a fog of working and keeping family matters and so on the road, and it's only when the lads get a little bit older then that you have a bit more time to throw into other pursuits. The other big interest that I'd have, Damien, is cycling. I was always very, very interested in cycling. And I've only had the opportunity to get back into that now in the last 3 or 4 years.
Actually go out on the road and go for...
That clears the head for you. But ironically enough now, the weekends tend to... Weekends are just as busy as during the week, because whether it's going to a match or increasingly as my own lads are getting older, you have less time for going to matches because you're at their matches and so on.
You've taken charge of a dynamic association. Will it take a while for your vision to evolve, or have you got a couple of points outlined as we speak?
That's something that's going to evolve. I think it would be a little bit premature at this remove, Damien, to have fixed ideas in my head of where the thing is going to go. If I was to try and articulate what we might like to see the GAA looking like in 10 years or in 20 years or 30 years, you would like it to still be a byword in Ireland for community and for volunteerism. You'd like it to still be something that people associate with participation. You'd like it to still have the preeminent place in people's minds in Ireland that it has had up to now. You would like it, actually, to be honest, the thing has been minded and protected and guarded and developed very, very carefully by all of the people, not just in this specific job, but in all around the country for the last 130 odd years. You'd like it to be safe and to be protected and to be still recognisable as the GAA that we all know and love in 20, 30 years' time.
I know from talking to people on county board level that you've assisted with and that you've worked with, and they speak very, very highly of how you helped them overcome their difficulties. Did it annoy you then that your appointment was seen by some media commentators as the GAA focusing on the commercial side of things going forward?
No, sure, that's my training. And I won't disavow that. It doesn't annoy me at all. I think in an enterprise of our size and scale, and by size and scale I mean just in terms of the national consciousness rather than just financial, it's no harm that the person that comes to that job would have some degree of running an enterprise of some kind of scale. There's no reason to say that that person couldn't come from a background very different from my own, and they have done in the past and done a fantastic job about it. It's not the preserve of any one particular educational background or training, I know that. I wouldn't like people to think that because the person that's coming into this job is from a financial background that it says something particular about the association and where it wants to go. It doesn't really. It just says that there was an array of candidates available, and for better or for worse, people decided that the person that was going to get the job came from that particular background. I'm terribly conscious of the little inherent tensions there between a not-for-profit organisation and having a financial person at the helm of it. But because you're from the particular discipline and background that I'm from, it doesn't mean that every waking thought that comes into your head is about money, Damien. I would like to think over the course of the last, whatever it is, number of years working here and working with the various county boards and a lot of clubs around the country and so on, people would recognise that in me. First and foremost, it's about the GAA. Financing the GAA is just a means to achieve doing the things that you need to do. That's all it is.
You mentioned volunteer and community as two words. Is there a gap there, Tom, at the moment between where the GAA is heading and that grassroots link, or is that a perception that maybe too much has been made of?
Well, that perception is there, and to the extent that the perception is there, irrespective of whether it's fact or not, that's something that needs to be addressed, and something needs to be done about that. That does persist, and you would hear it a little bit, and you'd be conscious of it yourself too. I mean, a little test at the end of the week, you'd like to go home and think, what difference did what I did now this week make for clubs around the country, and you'd like to be able to attest to at least a few things. It's not always the case. I'm very, very conscious that it's really difficult to run a club at the moment, and an awful lot of the interaction that goes on between ourselves here and clubs is in the realm of asking people to do more stuff and highlighting more and more responsibilities and difficulties to them. Most of the communication that people get from Croke Park, they could be forgiven for thinking it's about health and safety, and it's about insurance, and it's about use of social media, and it's about child protection, and it's about any number of things that are fierce important, but they place a burden on voluntary people when they have to be cognizant of all those things, and at the end of all that they still have to run football and hurling and handball. So we should be a resource for people. We shouldn't just be a source of demands upon people, which sometimes you can get the sense a little bit of talking to people that they do get a little bit frustrated at that. I don't think look, they're necessary, and I don't think it's a fair perception to have of all of my colleagues that work inside here in Croke Park, but at the same time, to the extent that that perception exists, we need to address it.
Tom, there's also a frustration out there among the grassroots. I'm not saying everybody, but with the broadcast rights, that some stuff has gone to subscription channels. Yeah. Where do you marry that in with the need to try and get the biggest audience for your sport, get as much revenue in as you possibly can, and trying to keep as much as you can free to air?
Yeah, there's a balancing act with that as well. You want the maximum exposure in terms of promotion and so on. You use the phrase there, earning as much money as you possibly can. We deliberately don't do that, actually, Damien. Like we're trying to strike a balance. I've no doubt but that we could have earned a little bit more from going down a particular other route. So we are kind of trying to hold ourselves in check a little bit, and you'll have seen that in things like alcohol sponsorship that we moved away from, before, a little bit ahead of whatever legislation might bring down the tracks for us. You'll have seen it with Congress this year in terms of gambling sponsorship and things. So it's not just about reeling in as much cash as you can physically harvest. Specifically when we're talking about TV games, I know that has been a matter of an awful lot of discourse, and in a way it's a little bit of a moot thing at the moment, because the next time we'll be coming up to those renegotiations and so on will be 2021. I think there is a balance to be struck, but I don't think we're too far away from it, to be honest with you. And the other thing I would always reinforce with people anytime I get the opportunity is, I'm not so much interested in where we're getting the money from. I'm more interested in what it is that we're going to do with it. So our mantra all the time is to try and plough as much of that back throughout the association as we can. So when people talk about, perhaps we should temper things a little bit in the commercial realm, we can do that. And if that's the direction that the membership want us to go, that's what we'll do. But it will have a knock-on effect in terms of the various ambitions that you'll also have to temper. Basically, everything that comes in goes back out, Damien.
You're not CEO or Director General of the Gaelic Players Association or the Club Players Association, but they are stakeholders. They are both looking for attention in different ways. How do you deal with what they both bring to the table? CPA are looking for some sort of normality with fixtures. GPA seem to be a little bit lost at the moment, but that's not maybe your concern right now. How do you factor both of those groups into your thinking going forward, Tom? Or do you even?
And there are any number of other stakeholders too, any number of them, Damien. They're all, those two organisations you mentioned are comprised of members of the GAA, so they're part of the broader family. I think in the case of the GPA are in the throes of appointing a new chief executive. So once that's done, I think we'll certainly be absolutely, I'd be delighted to do that. And in the case of the CPA, I don't think what they're espousing isn't really terribly different from what all of us would like to see, a fair and a coherent and an understandable and a predictable fixtures programme for lads that are playing at club level up and down the country. I don't think terribly many people could take issue with that as an aspiration. I think there are nuances in the thing, and there's a lot of complications in the thing, and you know as well as I do the way the GAA is structured. It's bottom up, it's local. There are complications county by county. You have, just even in terms of the scale of them, you have Leitrim at one end of the scale and Cork at the other in terms of number of clubs. Very, very difficult for a few heads in Drumcondra to decide how Leitrim and Cork are going to work out their fixture programme. That has to emanate from the ground up, I think. But all those things are nuances, and I'd be glad to talk to and I think matters are already in train actually to talk to the CPA over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Tom, thanks a million for your time, and wish you the very best luck in the future. Thanks for your time.
Damien, thank you very much.